1926, Yellowstone National Park. A ranger shoots the last two wolf pups in the Lemare Valley. Their mother had been killed weeks earlier. With those final gunshots, gray wolves, apex predators that had ruled these mountains for thousands of years, were gone. For the next 70 years, Yellowstone existed without wolves, and something strange started to happen. Rivers changed course. Forests stopped growing. Entire valleys turned to barren dirt. The park was dying, and nobody understood why. Then, in 1995, scientists tried something radical, something that had never been done before. They brought the wolves back. What happened next didn't just change Yellowstone, it changed how we understand nature itself. This is the story of how 14 wolves reshaped an entire landscape, and proved that some species aren't just part of an ecosystem, they are the ecosystem. To understand what wolves did, you first need to understand what happened without them. When Yellowstone was established as America's first national park in 1872, gray wolves were everywhere. Packs roamed every valley. Their howls echoed off every mountain, but wolves had a problem. They killed livestock. Ranchers outside the park lost cattle, sheep, horses. The economic damage was real, and the political pressure was enormous. So in 1926, the U.S. government launched an extermination campaign. Wolves were shot, trapped, poisoned, not just outside the park, inside it too. By 1926, they were gone. Park officials celebrated, ranchers cheered. The problem was solved, but within a decade, a new problem emerged. Elk populations exploded. Without wolves hunting them, elk herds grew from 4,000 to over 20,000. And elk are grazers, they eat everything. Willow trees along riverbanks, stripped bare, aspen groves, browsed to stumps, cottonwood forests, dead by the 1990s. Entire valleys in Yellowstone looked like deserts. Erosion carved through hillsides. Riverbanks collapsed. Beavers disappeared because there were no trees to build dams. Ecologists gave it a name, trophic cascade. When you remove an apex predator, the effects ripple down through every level of the ecosystem. Prey populations explode. Vegetation vanishes. Soil degrades. Entire food webs collapse. Yellowstone wasn't just missing wolves. It was missing the function wolves provided, and by the 1990s, the park was in ecological freefall. 2. The decision 1995. After decades of debate, lawsuits, environmental impact studies, and political battles, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approved a plan. Reintroduce gray wolves to Yellowstone. Not everyone agreed. Ranchers were furious. They'd fought for 70 years to eliminate wolves. Now the government wanted to bring them back. Hunters worried wolves would decimate elk herds, reducing hunting opportunities and revenue. Some locals feared for their safety. Wolves attacking humans, wolves invading towns. But scientists argued the ecosystem needed wolves, that Yellowstone was broken without them, that this was the only way to restore balance. The plan was simple on paper: capture wolves from Canada, acclimate them in pens, release them into the wild. In January 1995, the first wolves arrived. 14 wolves, 3 packs, transported from Alberta and British Columbia in wooden crates, by truck, then by sled into the backcountry. They were placed in acclimation pen Swaniker enclosures where they could adjust to their new home. Park biologists fed them elk carcasses, monitored their health, waited, and on March 21, 1995, the gates opened. For the first time in 70 years, wild wolves ran free in Yellowstone. Nobody knew if it would work. Nobody knew if the wolves would survive. Nobody knew what would happen next. Within weeks, the wolves started hunting, and the elk who had lived for 70 years without predators had no idea what to do. The first kills were clumsy. The wolves were adjusting, learning the terrain, testing strategies, but they learned fast. By summer, they were taking down elk regularly. By winter, they were thriving. And something unexpected started happening. The elk changed their behavior. Before wolves, elk grazed wherever they wanted, river valleys, open meadows, forest edges. No fear, no rush. But now, they had to watch, listen, move. Elk stopped congregating in valley bottoms where they were vulnerable. They avoided areas with poor visibility. They spent less time grazing in any one spot. Ecologists call this the landscape of fear. Wolves didn't just kill elk, they changed how elk lived. Where they grazed, how long they stayed, what they ate, and that shift, seemingly small, triggered something massive. In areas where elk stopped overgrazing, plants started growing again. Willows along riverbanks shot up, some reaching 15 feet in just a few years. Aspen groves, which hadn't regenerated in decades, began sprouting saplings. Cottonwood forests returned, and with the plants came everything else. Beavers came back. They built dams. Those dams created ponds. Ponds attracted amphibians, waterfowl, fish. Songbirds returned to nest in the willow thickets. Berries grew on the shrubs, feeding bears and birds. Foxes and eagles scavenged wolf kills, getting free meals in winter. Even scavenger beetles and ravens thrived on the carcasses. Within a decade, Yellowstone's ecosystem was transforming, all because 14 wolves started hunting. This is where the story gets almost unbelievable. Scientists noticed something strange. Rivers in Yellowstone were changing course, not over thousands of years, Over decades before wolves, riverbanks were collapsing. Without tree roots to hold soil in place, erosion was rampant. Rivers widened, became shallow, meandered unpredictably. But after wolves returned, after vegetation came back, riverbanks stabilized. Tree roots held the soil, shrubs slowed water flow, beavers built dams that controlled flooding, channels narrowed, pools deepened, water flowed clearer. Some streams that had been braided and chaotic began forming single, stable channels. Scientists documented it with aerial photography, satellite imagery, stream measurements. The rivers were literally reshaping because wolves were hunting elk. It's called a trophic cascade, but this was on a scale nobody had predicted. One species, 14 animals, reshaping geology. Here's how it worked. Wolves hunted elk, gives elk changed grazing behavior, gives vegetation regrew, gives roots stabilized soil, gives erosion decreased, gives rivers changed course. 6 degrees of separation from wolves to rivers, and it didn't stop there. The new vegetation cooled stream temperatures that created better habitat for trout. Trout populations increased. Osprey and otters came back to feed on them. The dams built by returning beavers created wetlands. Those wetlands became breeding grounds for amphibians, nesting sites for waterfowl, and water sources during droughts. Yellowstone wasn't just recovering, it was being rebuilt, piece by piece, species by species, by the presence of wolves. By 2020, the wolf population had grown to around 100 individuals in the park, 8 pack stable territories, natural mortality, and birth rates. The ecosystem had found a new balance. But here's the complicated part. Not everyone was celebrating. Wolves don't respect park boundaries. By the early 2000s, some wolves were leaving Yellowstone, roaming into Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and sometimes, they were killing livestock. A sheep here, a calf there, occasionally an entire herd. If a wolf found a way into a pen, for ranchers already operating on thin margins, the losses were devastating, not just economically, but emotionally. These were families who'd lived on the land for generations, who'd fought to remove wolves a century earlier, and now the government had brought them back. Compensation programs were established. If a rancher could prove a wolf killed their animal, they'd be reimbursed, but proving it was hard. Wolves are efficient, they don't always leave evidence. And even when ranchers were compensated, it didn't fix the anxiety, the constant vigilance, the fear of losing animals you'd raised. Then there were the hunters. Elk populations inside Yellowstone dropped from 20,000 to around 4,000 to 7,000, estimates vary. Some of that was wolves, some was grizzly bears, some was drought, some was hunting outside the park, but hunters blamed wolves. Revenue from elk hunting licenses, funds, state wildlife programs. Fewer elk meant fewer tags sold. Less money for conservation? In 2011, wolves were removed from the endangered species list in Montana and Idaho. Hunting seasons opened. In the first year, hunters killed over 500 wolves across the northern Rockies. Some were wolves that had been born in Yellowstone, wandered outside the park, and were shot legally. One famous pack, the Lamar Canyon pack, lost its alpha female, 06, to a hunter in Wyoming in 2012. She was the most watched, most studied wolf in Yellowstone. Her death sparked national outrage. Conservationists called it murder. Hunters called it management. The debate rages on, because here's the truth. Yellowstone's wolf reintroduction worked ecologically, but socially, it's still a war. The Yellowstone wolf reintroduction is one of the most studied ecological experiments in history. Over 500 scientific papers have been published analyzing its effects. Documentaries, books, TED Talks. It proved something scientists had suspected but never confirmed at this scale. Apex predators aren't optional, they're essential. They don't just kill prey, they shape behavior. They determine where animals graze, nest, hunt. They influence plant growth, soil health, water flow. Remove them, and ecosystems unravel. Restore them, and ecosystems heal. Yellowstone became the proof, and it inspired similar projects worldwide. Lynx reintroduced to the Alps, jaguars protected in Central America, wolves considered for Scotland, Colorado, and Mexico. In 2020, Colorado voters approved a ballot measure to reintroduce wolves. The first releases happened in 2020, 3 directly inspired by Yellowstone's success. But Yellowstone also taught us something uncomfortable. Ecological success doesn't mean social acceptance. Wolves thrived inside the park, but outside, they're shot, trapped, and poisoned. In 2021, Montana and Idaho expanded wolf hunting quotas, allowing more kills closer to Yellowstone's borders. Some scientists warn this could destabilize packs inside the park. Others argue it's necessary for coexistence. The debate will never be purely scientific. It's cultural, political, economic. It's about values. Do we value wilderness, even if it's inconvenient? Do we value predators, even if they cost us something? Do we value ecosystems that function naturally, even if they don't serve human interests first? Yellowstone's wolves answered the ecological question, but they raised 100 new human ones. Today, if you visit Yellowstone in winter, you might hear them, a howl cutting through the frozen air, then another, then a chorus. The sound that was silent for 70 years is back. Tourists drive from around the world just to catch a glimpse. Wolf watching generates an estimated $35 million annually for the local economy. The wolves that were once worth $50 dead are now worth millions alive. But here's what most people don't know. The same year Yellowstone's wolves were reintroduced in 1995, another wolf reintroduction was happening in North Carolina. Red wolves, smaller, rarer, more endangered, and unlike Yellowstone, it failed twice. Because wolves don't just need science to survive, they need people willing to let them. Yellowstone worked because it had federal protection, political will, public support, but when any of those pieces fall apart, wolves disappear. And sometimes, no amount of science can bring them back. The Yellowstone wolves taught us that ecosystems can heal, but they also taught us that healing requires more than biology. It requires us to decide what kind of world do we want to live in. One where apex predators roam free, reshape rivers, and remind us we're not the only force that matters. Or one where nature exists only where it's convenient, controlled, and caged. Yellowstone gave wolves a second chance. But not every wolf gets one. Thanks for watching Animal Channel Space. If this story changed how you see predators, ecosystems, or conservation, share it, and subscribe. Because next time, we're telling the story of the wolves that didn't make it back. The red wolves of Texas. Reintroduced, extinct, reintroduced again, and extinct again. The question is why?